Apollo 13 was supposed to be the third manned moon landing to gather important science on a unique part of the moon. What NASA got instead was a life-and-death rescue mission, forcing them to attempt to save 3 astronauts stranded in a heavily damaged spacecraft, on a trajectory that would miss Earth by thousands of miles. This is Apollo 13.
Hey Joe, glad you brought that up because I was really serious about the Deadlock high now.
13, we've got one more item for you when you get a chance. We'd like it to
Okay,
stir up your cryo tanks.
I tried to reset and build some one
Econ is seeing an AHC problem. Like a lot of instrumentation problems there. Go ahead, Kranz.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Apollo 11 had proven that we can put people on the moon, and Apollo 12 had done so accurately. Apollo 13's mission was to use those lessons learned to put astronauts on a specific region of the moon, the Fra Mauro crater. This mission would have significantly more emphasis on gathering science and geological samples than the previous missions, as the crew's training could focus more heavily on gathering science rather than just largely focusing on flying the spacecraft to the moon. Because of this, the selection of the landing site on the moon would be more important than the last 2 missions. Apollo 11's selection of landing sites had to be heavily restricted in order to keep the spacecraft in a free return trajectory. This was desirable because the spacecraft would already be on a path towards Earth if anything went wrong. Apollo 12 was the first to step out of this free return trajectory, which opened up more landing sites. Apollo 13's goal was to do that maneuver sooner. This would open up the Fra Mauro landing site, but at the cost of making this mission considerably more dangerous. The primary crew for this mission was supposed to be Jim Lovell, Fred Hayes, and Ken Mattingly. Plans would have to change fast though, as just 6 days before the launch, one of the backup crew, Charles M. Duke, would fall ill to the rubella virus. This would also expose both the primary and the backup crews to the virus. Blood samples from the astronauts would show that both Lovell and Hayes had an immunity to rubella, likely from being previously exposed, so they were not at risk of falling ill. John Young and Jack Swigert of the backup crew also had this immunity. Mattingly, however, did not. The incubation time of rubella meant that if he did come down with the disease, it would be when they were scheduled to be in lunar orbit above the moon, possibly when Mattingly was supposed to be alone in the command module. Replacing the entire primary crew with the backup crew wasn't an option, as Duke would have still been symptomatic at launch. Delaying the mission until the next launch window 28 days later also wasn't an option because of the expense involved. With a rapidly upcoming launch window, the decision was made just 3 days before launch to replace Mattingly with Jack Swigert. The crew would be launching on the Saturn V rocket, a design that had proven itself over the last 2 successful moon landings. This one, designated AS-508, would have a weight just over 6.5 million pounds, making this, at the time, the heaviest spacecraft ever launched. 5 million of those pounds are just in the first stage alone. On the 11th of April 1970, the crew would enter the rocket on Pad 39A at Florida's Kennedy Space Center for its 2:13 p.m. launch, unaware that they would not reach their destination.
10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit and we have liftoff at 2:13. The Saturn V building up to 7.6 million pounds of thrust, and it has cleared the tower.
This is Mission Control Houston. We appear to have a good first stage at this point.
13 Houston, go at 30 seconds.
Roll complete and we're pitching.
Roger that. Stand by for mode 1 Bravo. Mark 1 Bravo.
1 Bravo. Command.
And the booster engineer reports we're now through the region of maximum dynamic pressure and we're go.
13 Houston, stand by for mode 1 Charlie. Mark, you're 1 Charlie.
Mark 1 Charlie.
And 13, you're go for staging.
Go for staging, Roger. We're EDS manual. Still ignition.
Roger.
Start. Power jet.
The Saturn V's first and second stages are powered by 5 liquid-fueled engines, which gives the rocket some redundancy if one of them were to fail. This would be the first significant malfunction Apollo 13 would have to endure, as the central engine unexpectedly shuts down. Even though an engine had failed on the second stage of the rocket, the mission was still a go.
13 Houston, trajectory's good, thrust is good.
Roger.
The remaining engines could still use all the fuel left in the tanks, but they would be dragging around a dead engine, so they would be slightly short of their expected speed once the stage finished its burn.
And level reports that the guidance system is correcting the small errors.
And S4 ignition, Houston.
Roger that, Jim. Thrust looks good.
The
Roger.
second stage did its job by burning for 34 seconds longer than planned to account for the lost engine. It's now up to the third stage to make up the rest of the velocity and put the spacecraft into orbit. The third stage would burn for around 2 minutes and 40 seconds, 9 seconds longer than originally planned. The longer burns on both stages were enough to overcome the lost energy from the engine failure. After reading the velocity, Apollo 13 was just 1.9 feet per second slower than expected.
And the flight dynamics officer says at first glance we look good on the orbit.
The spacecraft had entered its planned orbit around Earth at 100 nautical miles, traveling 25,566 feet per second. Apollo 13 is now traveling 21 times faster than a bullet. The astronauts will use this opportunity to calibrate their navigational and scientific instruments to their new environment in space in zero gravity. This also gives the third stage engine a chance to cool down and regain the pressure in its tanks before its next firing to get it to the moon. After 1.5 orbits, Apollo 13 begins its translunar injection burn.
You are go for TLI.
Understand, and just out of curiosity, was that engine out to be some more S4B fuel?
The engine out did cause you to use more S4B fuel, about a 10-second longer burn, but you're still go.
Okay, thank you.
This burn would bring the spacecraft out of Earth's orbit and put it in front of the path of the moon. The trajectory was aimed at where the moon would be in 3 days when the spacecraft was planned to get there. The spacecraft would be flown in front of the moon, and the moon's gravity would swing the spacecraft back towards Earth. This maneuver is known as a free return trajectory. It's a free return because they don't have to spend any fuel to get back to Earth. This trajectory was chosen for safety reasons. Even if the spacecraft's main engine was lost, the astronauts would still return home. This decision would become incredibly important in determining the future survival of the astronauts. The third stage would continue its second and final burn, launching the spacecraft to the moon. It was mission critical that this stage burned for just the right amount of time. If they were too slow, the moon would have too much influence on the spacecraft once it got there, bringing it too far from Earth to be captured. If the spacecraft was too fast, it would fly past the moon too quickly and not allow it to point the spacecraft's trajectory completely back towards Earth once it leaves its influence. After the burn was completed, the astronauts measured how far off they were from their planned speed and trajectory.
And 13 Houston, the booster reports that everything looks good with the S4.
Sounds good, Houston. The ride was very nominal. We had a little vibration, though, during most of the run.
Okay, we copied your call on that, Jim.
Okay, Joe, the Disky read 35560, and Delta VC was minus 3.0.
They're now traveling 35,560 feet per second, just 3 feet per second higher than anticipated.
Oh, roger that. You can't ask for much better than that.
They had just entered their free return trajectory. They would now prepare for a maneuver that needed to be just as precise as the last.
This is Mission Control. We're now at 2 hours 54 minutes with the crew preparing for the CSM separation from the S4B, the subsequent docking with the lunar module, and the ejection of the LEM and command module from the Saturn third stage.
Jack Swigert would be flying this by hand.
Telemetry data here on the ground indicates that the spacecraft has separated from the S4B. Astronaut Jack Swigert at this time would be in the commander's couch, the left-hand couch, at the controls of the spacecraft during the transposition and docking maneuvers.
Swigert now needs to flip the command module around to line it up with the lunar module.
That's quite a bang, Joe. We've separated. We've pitched around about 60 degrees now. Okay, we got the slough panels. One of them's out in front now.
So.
Swigert then uses the hand controllers to bring the two spacecraft together. A target is visible on the lunar module that can be lined up with a reticle inside of the command module, similar to a red dot sight. This way, both vehicles can be easily lined up. A probe on the top of the command module will lock inside of the lunar module once they're properly docked. The probe will bring the two spacecraft together and automatically secure them with latches. Now, preloaded springs would separate the lunar module from the third stage, and reaction control thrusters would continue to pull them apart. The crew would wait to see the third stage floating away, and then they would radio mission control to send signals to the stage which would fire thrusters and remotely move it further away from the crewed modules. Mission control would command the third stage into a trajectory that would crash into the moon. This was done on purpose so that probes already landed on the moon could detect the impact from the stage and collect data from a known mass hitting a known place at a known speed. This would provide valuable information about the moon's composition and what's underneath its surface. The crew was now prepared for their 3-day journey to the moon. This break in the action gave the crew that time to focus on slightly less immediately life-threatening tasks like Earth photography.
Roger, we're at that stage now where we're going to take some Earth weather photography. If you're standing by, I have the camera aimed at the Earth right now, and I'll give you a mark when I take this first picture.
Roger, we copy, Jim. We'll be standing by for the mark.
Okay, Houston, 3, 2, 1, mark.
Roger, copy.
A photograph of Earth would be taken every 20 minutes so that the movement of the weather can be observed when the images are stacked on top of each other. 11 would be taken in total. The command service module will use its RCS thrusters to force the spacecraft into a slow roll. This is so that no part of the spacecraft is exposed to the sun for too long, and it would even out the heating effects over the whole spacecraft. This maneuver was called passive thermal control, or PTC. With the spacecraft set up for its 3-day journey to the moon, the crew could catch up on some much-needed sleep.
Hello, Houston. Houston. Hello, 13. Over.
Good morning, 13. This is Houston. How are you?
Radio loud and clear. And we had fairly good news.
And I have a small flight plan update for you sometime a little later on when you're ready to copy. There's no big deals in it. And 13, Houston, we'd like to verify that you cycled the O2 cryo fans. We saw the H2, but we didn't see the O2 get stirred up.
In zero gravity, the contents of supercritical tanks would sometimes separate out into portions of different density. If a region of higher low density was picked up by the sensor in the tank, it would give off a false reading and set off alarms. Because of this, the contents of the supercritical tanks had to be stirred with fans in order to get an accurate reading of the tank's real pressure.
Yeah, Joe, we did, and kind of looked like we might have had a little stratification because right after we put them on, we had a cryo press light.
Okay, ECOM told me that might happen, and he was right. Okay, at 23 hours, the total RCS is 1121. And the cryos are as follows. H2 tank 1, 83%. H2 tank 2, 86%. O2 tank 1, 87%. O2 tank 2, 87%. Over.
Guys, we forgot. We'd like to hear what the news is.
Okay, there's not a whole lot to it. Okay, let's see. The Beatles have announced they will no longer perform as a group. The quartet is reported to have made in excess of $500 million during their short musical career. However, rumors that they will use this money to start their own space program are false.
Maybe we can borrow some.
Okay. Some truck lines are being struck in the Midwest, and the school teachers have walked off the job in Minneapolis. Today's favorite pastime across the U.S. Have you guys completed your income tax?
How do I apply for the extension?
Lovell makes a joke about forgetting to file his taxes and needing an extension, not realizing that that is the exact situation that Jack Swigert is actually in.
Yeah, Joe, I gotta... Hey, that ain't too funny. Things kind of happen real fast down there, and I do need an extension. I didn't get mine filed. I'm really serious. Would you do it?
You're breaking up the room down there.
Time in it.
We'll
I
see.
may be spending time in another quarantine besides the one that they're planning for me.
We'll see what we can do, Jack. We'll get with recovery and see if we can get the agent out there in the Pacific when you come back.
Houston, this is 13. Is it true that Jack's income tax return was going to be used to buy the ascent fuel for the loan?
Well, considering that he's a bachelor and hasn't got that deduction to take, yeah.
Hey, Joe, I'm glad you brought that up because I was really serious about that.
And Jim McDivitt says, yeah, now that you mention it, he forgot to fill the ascent stage. Should give you very good performance on descent.
You should have a lot more hover time, huh?
That's right.
This is Apollo Control. At 27 hours, 20 minutes ground elapsed time. The crew rather quiet during this period, still in the passive thermal control barbecue mode. Velocity now 4,991 feet per second. Coming up in slightly over 20 seconds on the midpoint in distance, at which time the spacecraft will be equally far from the Earth and from the Moon. The distance at this time will be 128,880.5 statute miles. Coming up, Mark. Continuing to leave the circuit live as we anticipate further discussions, and later on today the mid-course correction burn number 2, which will take Apollo 13 out of the free return trajectory into the so-called hybrid trajectory, which would not necessarily return to the vicinity of the Earth. The closest approach would be something in the nature of 40,000 miles coming back from the non-free return trajectory.
Just a passing comment, Joe. We're having lunch right now, and just made myself a hot dog sandwich with ketchup. Very tasty and almost unheard of in the old days.
That's correct, 13. As I recall the flight plan, you're supposed to put mustard on the hot dogs and not ketchup, but I guess we'll overlook that.
We blew it.
Right.
Apollo 13, Houston.
Go ahead, Joe.
Hey, you got new Capcom on now with the black crew, and we have about 3 items to give you, Jack. I'm going to give you some high-gain antenna angles for TV, and the rest is just information. And the last items for Jack. Jack, preliminary indications are that you can get a 60-day extension on your filing your income tax if you're out of the country.
That's good news. I guess I qualify.
Yeah, we were just looking at the map, and you're south of Florida, so you're not in the country now. Jim, Houston, you're looking good down here. Go for the burn.
The crew had just received the go message for their mid-course correction 2 burn. This burn would bring the spacecraft out of its safe free return trajectory and put it into a hybrid trajectory closer to the moon's surface. If the spacecraft were to not make any burns after this one, it would miss Earth by thousands of miles on its return. After their short burn, they were now on the correct trajectory towards the Fra Mauro crater and away from Earth. With this day of work complete, they could now begin their second rest period of the mission to regain some sleep.
Houston, Apollo 13, over.
Good morning, 13. You're early.
So I just thought we'd wake you up, and we're awake and getting the spacecraft shipshape and see the mic.
Roger. Spacecraft's in real good shape as far as we're concerned, Jim. We're bored to tears down here. We do have a few little items for you, like a P-37 update and a couple of flight plan updates, but there's no rush about them. Over.
And it might be interesting that just after we went to sleep last night, we had a master alarm, and it really scared us. And we rolled over the cockpit like a wet noodle.
Sorry it wasn't something more significant. I've also got a procedure for you on that H2 tank. Simple thing after you get done stirring up the cryos.
The pressure inside of the spacecraft's supercritical hydrogen tank 2 had been fluctuating enough to set off pressure alarms and startle the crew. This was an issue they would begin to troubleshoot when a new issue arose.
I've got a consumables update for you, Jim, if you're ready for that.
Ready, copy.
Okay, as of 47 hours, RCS total 1096, and the H2, they gave me the H2s in percent, 76%, and on the O2 we have 81%. However, we show the O2 tank 2 reading off scale high now. We're quite sure it's a sensor failure. We'd like you to verify it with your onboard reading.
Okay, stand by. Joe, we confirm our gauge reading is the number 2 O2 tank is reading off scale high now, but Jack just tells me it was okay when he first looked at it this morning.
We verify that. At 46:45, we had 82%, and apparently when he stirred the cryos, the sensor broke.
Now, not only is their hydrogen tank's pressure fluctuating, but the quantity sensor for oxygen tank 2 was reading off-scale high. Oxygen tank 1's sensor seemed to be working, so that one could be used to get a general idea of the pressure in tank 2 as long as they're used evenly. This moon landing is still very much a go.
Apollo 13, Houston. Go ahead, Joe. All right, Jack. One thing we'd like to have done sometime soon is to have you cycle the cryo fans in O2 tank 2 one more time. We'd like to see if we can get that sensor back.
Okay, go on. O2 tank 2 fan on now.
Roger. Apollo 13, Houston.
Go ahead, Joe.
We're ready to have the O2 tank 2 fan off, and thank you.
Okay. Doesn't look like we got it back, huh?
No, it doesn't, Jack. Apollo 13, Houston.
Go ahead.
Roger 13. Because of the O2 tank 2 quantity sensor dropout, ECOM wants to keep a little closer track of the cryo quantities, and he's going to be asking you to stir all the cryo tanks at slightly more frequent intervals than have been planned. And the first time is now, and we'll be calling you probably every 5 or 6 hours, except during sleep periods and high activity periods. We'd like you to do it now. Over.
Okay, we'll start a cryo stir now.
Thank you. And 13 Houston, for your information, a normal 1 minute or so stir will be.
They would begin to regularly stir both of the oxygen tanks to get a more accurate read on what was left in them. This would help them infer how much was in the tank with a broken sensor. The command module wasn't alone in its supercritical tank issues. The lunar module's helium tanks had been tested on the ground and had shown some signs of poor insulation. Ground control wanted a reading of the pressures on board, inside of the lunar module, so they radioed the crew to enter the lunar module 3 hours earlier than planned.
Okay, the LMP is entered to LEM.
Roger.
Okay, and it just flickered down to 710. It's going to flicker in between 710 and 720.
Roger, 710 to 720.
Our supercritical helium pressure reading was 720 pounds per square inch, a very desirable number. We're at 54 hours, 53 minutes now into the flight. Apollo 13 at 176,171 nautical miles away from Earth. We're standing by now for receipt of television.
The crew deploys the high-gain antenna in order to send over a video signal that would be broadcasted to people's televisions. The crew would need to stop their passive thermal control roll in order to line up their antenna with Earth. The success of the previous 2 moon landings gave the public a false impression that these missions were now routine and didn't pose a significant risk to the astronauts. As such, the media largely felt it wasn't in their interest to cover this mission. No TV networks would show Apollo 13's broadcast. The crew would attempt to give a good show regardless of the public's apparent disinterest.
Okay, Houston, we'll try to pick you up on high gain.
Apollo Control Houston, standing by now for receipt of television transmission. We're now receiving a transmission, television transmission.
Okay, 13, we got Fredo on TV. The limb, as you can see, it looked pretty clean. I found a couple of loose washers, about it, and a little plastic cap off the sequence camera had come loose, and I found it lodged over by the ED panel. Right under Jim now, he's actually standing on what looks to be a can here, and for the sake of all the people back there, housed inside this can is the Lamb Masson engine, or hopefully you can see my hand resting on top of right now. The engine that we use to get off of the moon. And I guess an apt description for this device would be a fish scale. And you can see I'm weighing myself right now, and it says I weigh actually less than 0 right now. Guess its calibration isn't too good.
That'll be the day.
Okay, what I have out now, Jack, is LEVA, which has also been shown before. It's a head garment for wearing out on the surface. And I'm bringing Jim's out here to show a couple of mods. One problem before is that the cast of characters out on the surface haven't been able to be distinguished apart very well. So not only Jim's suit has some red stripes on it, but as you can see, his LEVA also has a red stripe. And now you can see one other mod too here, Jack, which I hadn't really seen myself before. I guess on 12, Pete and Al had commented about having trouble with sunlight in the eyes, so on our LEVAs, they have put on a new center section, which you can pull down and use sort of like a baseball cap. Okay, Jack, who fixed up my LEVA? What Fred is opening up is a drink bag that we place inside of our neck ring that will allow us to drink while we're on the lunar surface. Pete and Al did not have that in Apollo 12, and they consequently got very thirsty. But we hope to alleviate that situation by having our own little bag of water, which with very little effort we can have a sip or two while we're looking around and doing our geology work. So if you hear any funny noises, it's just probably the drink bag. Fred, the bag's empty. Okay, Jack, I'm looking out the right window now, and not too far off in the distance now, you can see the objective. And I'll zoom in on it here a little and see if it brings it in better. And it's actually beginning to look a little bigger now. You can see quite distinctly some of the features with the naked eye. And so far, I guess I have to even agree with Jim that it's still looking pretty gray with white spots.
Okay, Fred, we're getting a good picture of your destination there.
You're looking now at our probe that we place on the nose of Odyssey. It's a very heavy thing, but of course in zero gravity it weighs nothing, and it's much easier to move around. As a matter of fact, both Fred and Jack commented, as many people in the past have, of how much bigger the spacecraft appears in actual flight when you have such ease of movement compared to our simulators, which make training rather difficult.
Okay, we're seeing a good picture of the probe there, Jim, and looks like the character's shaved before the show this time.
Well, Fred said he had to keep up his TV image. Yeah, that may be my first and last time, though, Jack. It took Fred 1 hour to shave.
Okay, Jim, we're seeing a tape recorder now, and just by the way, how long do you expect to keep the TV on this evening?
Well, whenever you stand by one. Yeah, I got him with the cabin repress valve again there, Jack. Every time he does that, our hearts jump in our mouth.
Okay, Jim, it's been a real good TV show. We think we ought to conclude it from here now. What do you think?
Roger, sounds good, and this is the crew of Apollo 13, wishing everybody there a nice evening, and we're just about ready to close out our inspection of Aquarius and get back for a pleasant evening at Odyssey. Good night.
Thank you, 13.
13, we've got one more item for you when you get a chance. We'd like it to stir up your cryo tanks. In addition, I have Shaft and Trunnion
Okay.
for a look at the Comet Bennett if you need it.
Okay, stand by.
Fine, guidance. Go, guidance. We've had a hardware restart. I don't know what it was.
Okay. Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Yes, Houston, we've had a problem. We've had a main B bus undervolt.
Roger, main B undervolt.
We got a main B undervolt.
Okay, Flight, we've got some instrumentation flags. Let me add them up.
Roger.
Okay, stand by, 13. We're looking at it.
We may have had an instrumentation problem, Flight.
Roger.
55 hours, 54 minutes, and 53 seconds into Apollo 13, Oxygen Tank 2 explodes, ripping off the side panel of the spacecraft and severely damaging the equipment inside. Ground control could only see the radio telemetry coming down from the spacecraft and had no idea of the immediate damage that was caused by the explosion. What they could see, however, only gave them questions. The numerous warnings and alarms that ground control was seeing, to them, might be a false alarm caused by erroneous sensor readings, just like the pressure sensor earlier in Oxygen Tank 2. This is why an instrumentation problem is called out as the first possible explanation to the alarms. They would begin to put together the pieces to figure out what really just happened. The spacecraft's electrical system is connected to fuel cells. These fuel cells take in oxygen and hydrogen from the spacecraft's tanks and react them together. This would generate the electricity needed for the spacecraft, and the astronauts could use the water that was a product of the reaction. The astronauts needed to rely on these fuel cells to generate electricity and water throughout the flight, as carrying a separate water supply and batteries would have significantly increased weight. The service module is equipped with 3 of them. The fuel cells are connected to the spacecraft's electrical system through electrical buses which distribute the power to the other parts of the spacecraft. The fuel cells generate a direct current which go into 2 direct current main buses. Both buses are connected to their own inverters which power separate alternating current buses, allowing alternating current devices to also be powered. This is a redundant system that the crew will now need to take advantage of. Fuel cells 1 and 3, which were taking oxygen from the now destroyed Oxygen Tank 2, significantly drop in voltage. Main bus B, at the time of the explosion, was only connected to fuel cell 3, which is now not producing electricity. This throws up a main bus B undervolt warning, which the crew and ground control can see. Right now, the astronauts are relying on one dying fuel cell 2, in order to generate the entire spacecraft's electricity. It won't last long. A hardware restart followed by a main bus B undervolt are the first indications to ground control that something had gone wrong.
And we had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning there. In the interim here, we're starting to go ahead and button up the tunnel again.
The fuel cell's drop in voltage started a cascade of events alongside the explosion. Multiple sensors, including the ones inside of the cryogenic tanks, were being powered by the now dead main bus B. These sensors would lose power and drop out as a result. The spacecraft's guidance control system and computers would also restart.
And Houston, we had a restart on our computer. We had a pink light and the restart reset.
Roger, restart and a ping's light. Restart on a ping and reset.
Okay, AC2 is showing zip. I'm going to try to reconfigure on that jack.
Ecom, you were seeing any AC problems? Looked like
Flight
we had
Ecom?
a lot of instrumentation problems there. Go ahead.
That's firm. He's flipping our fuel cells around, Flight.
Well, let's get some recommendation here, Si, if you got any better ideas.
Yeah, we got a main bus A undervolt now too, Sean.
Main A undervolt.
The spacecraft's other bus, main bus A, starts showing signs of weakening from losing one of its fuel cells.
It's reading about 25 and a half. Main B is reading zip right now.
Flight Econ?
Go ahead.
He's got fuel cells 1 and 3 are offline. We've got main A volts, we have no main B volts. Have him attempt to reconnect the fuel cells. Fuel cell 1 to main A, fuel cell 3 to main B.
Okay, now, do we have instrumentation problems?
Well, we lost it does appear we've lost AC bus 2 voltage. Main B is reading 4 volts, and that effectively takes AC2 away from us.
Okay.
13 Houston, we'd like you to attempt to reconnect fuel cell 1 to main A and fuel cell 3 to main B.
Okay, Houston, I'm showing, I tried to reset and fuel cell 1 and 3 are both showing gray flags, but they're both showing zip on the flows.
The crew attempts to reset the fuel cells into the same configuration, which results in no changes.
Roger. Flight Econ?
Go, Ecom.
Let's reverse the configuration request.
Okay, but wait a minute. We got a good main A bus. Let's make sure that whatever we do doesn't screw up main A.
Fuel
main
cell
A
2 is on main A flight.
Okay.
I'm not going to ask to change that.
Okay, what do you want to do?
Let's try to put fuel cell 1 on main B, fuel cell 3 on main A. We'll use the other sensing circuitry. We're not going to touch fuel cell 2, Flight.
Okay, but if we got any problems in the system, I want to make sure that we don't blow the voltage off main A, and then we're not going to be able to see anything. Can we review our status here, Si, and see what we've got from a standpoint of status? What do you think we got in the spacecraft that's good?
Main bus A is reading 25 volts.
Okay, main A.
Okay. And that's reflected by the fact fuel cell 2 is putting out 53 amps, which is just about the most it can, and keep our voltage up.
Okay.
So that's bona fide. AC bus 2 is 0, which is reflected by the fact we lost main B. Flight Econ?
Go, Ecom.
Okay, let's get a readout on a couple fuel cell pressures here.
Okay.
Fuel cell 1 N2 pressure, fuel cell 3 O2 pressure. We're reading 0 N2 pressure in fuel cell 1 and 13 psi on fuel cell 3 O2 pressure.
13 Houston, we'd like you to verify a couple readings for us. We'd like the nitrogen pressure on fuel cell 1. We need the oxygen pressure on fuel cell 2.
Okay, nitrogen on 1 and oxygen on 2, is that correct?
Negative oxygen on 3.
Okay, now are we using RCS now?
That's affirmative. We're going to have to switch some thrusters over to main A to hold attitude here.
Okay. How much RCS we used?
Oh, we've used, I would guess 25 pounds.
Okay, give me a minimum fuel usage configuration that'll keep me attitude.
Roger.
The RCS thrusters have been firing since the explosion, attempting to keep the spacecraft in an attitude that has radio contact with Earth and that could avoid gimbal lock. This would eventually give the spacecraft enough velocity to begin deviating from its planned trajectory.
Flight Telmu. Go Telmu.
The LEM heater currents become essentially static.
Raj, let's solve one problem at a time. Come back to me later on in it.
And 2 Baker, which is 3 oxygen, says 0.6.
2 Baker says 0.6, and say again the other one.
Fuel cell 1, nitrogen, reads 0.
Roger, 0.
Both fuel cells are well under their normal operating pressures. This is a hint to ground control that something might have gone wrong with the supercritical tanks providing the gas, but it might also just be another sensor error.
Flight Econ?
Go ahead.
Why don't we try leave fuel cell 2 alone and just make sure that 1 and 3 are disconnected from both buses, and make sure that there's absolutely won't be any load on them at all. And let's see what happens to those cells.
Okay, Barrett, what do you want to do? Open circuit fuel cell 1 and 3?
That's firm flight.
Okay. Capcom, let's recommend we open circuit fuel cell number 1 and number 3 and leave fuel cell number 2 as is.
Okay, 1 and 3 open circuit, 2 as is, and earlier got a report from them that 1 and 3 were reading gray but 0 flow.
Yeah, Capcom, let's amend that. Ecom from Flight.
Flight Econ.
Why don't we just open circuit 1 and make sure that we don't have any problems getting that back onto the bus? Let's
Okay,
just
fine.
watch it for a while before we make any further moves with 3.
Roger.
Okay, Capcom, let's just open circuit 1 of those right now.
13 Houston, we'd like you to open circuit fuel cell 1. Leave 2 and 3 as is.
Okay, I'll get to work on that.
Ground control hopes to alleviate any problems the fuel cells might be having by disconnecting them from the rest of the spacecraft's electrical systems. Right now, they don't know what's going on with the spacecraft, and out of caution decide to only disconnect 1 in case they start getting more issues from them.
And Jack, our O2 quantity number 2 tank is reading 0. Did you get that?
O2 quantity number 2 is 0.
That's AC, okay.
The gauge that was previously acting up now shows there's nothing in the tank. Louisville realizes that the gauge is being powered by the now dead AC bus 2, so he disregards that reading and then immediately makes a startling discovery.
Yeah, that's because of AC, and it looks to me, looking out the hatch, that we are venting something.
Crew thinks they're venting something.
I heard that, Flight.
We are venting something out into space.
Roger, we copy your venting.
The spacecraft had been venting something since the explosion.
Okay, let's everybody think of the kind of things we'd be venting. GNC, you got anything that looks abnormal in your system?
Negative, Flight.
Okay, fuel cell 1, you just wanted off the line now, Jack, is that right?
We just wanted you to open circuit fuel cell
right?
1.
Okay, she's off the line.
Okay, now let's everybody keep cool. We got the LEM still attached. The LEM spacecraft's good, so if we need to get back home, we got a LEM to do a good portion of it with. Okay, let's make sure that we don't do anything that's going to blow our CSM electrical power with the batteries or that will cause us to lose the main or the fuel cell number 2. Okay, we want to keep the O2 and that kind of stuff working. We'd like to have RCS, but we got the command module system, so we're in good shape if we need to get home. Let's solve the problem, but let's not make it any worse by guessing.
It's Apollo Control, Houston. This rapid exchange of conversation you've heard, the main B bus is off the line. Fuel cells 1 and 3 also off the line. Fuel cell 2 is presently on the line. We now show 13 at an altitude of 178,643 nautical miles. We're at 56 hours, 12 minutes into the flight.
Okay, can you tell us anything about the venting,
Okay.
where it's coming from? What window you see it at?
It's coming out of window 1 right now, Jack.
Flight.
Go ahead.
I think the best thing we can do right now is start a power down.
Okay,
Let's go down the emergency 1-5.
okay. What, do you want to go to power down? Give me the page.
Emergency 1-5 flight. We'll go down, try to get a delta of 10 amps reduction.
Ecom, do you want to go through that again? What do you want to power down to?
I want to power down a total of 10 amps flight.
A total of 10 amps.
That's firm.
Okay. Capcom, we'd recommend emergency power down checklist 1-5. We want to power down a total or a delta of 10 amps from where we are now.
Flight GNC.
Go, GNC.
Can we afford to do a PTC first and then we shut off all of that stuff with no problems?
Why? You think you're going to have a thermal problem here?
Well, we could have, if we stay there too long.
Okay, we'll run into that one later, Buck.
Okay.
I want to get our major problem sorted out now.
You want, still want 1-5 down to 10
1-5 powered down, a delta of 10 amps, Capcom.
Okay, 13, this is Houston. We'd like you to go to your GNC checklist, the pink pages 1-5. Do power down until we get a delta of 10 amps, over.
Flight Econ?
This is go, Econ.
Okay, I need one thing right now. He's powering down. He's down to 41 amps total spacecraft. I'd like to get my AC2 bus back so I can look at O2 tank 2 pressure. I have no insight into that.
Okay.
Let's get, I guess we can put the inverter 3 to main A, AC2. And then
let me
we'll
ask
just
you
do
a
it
question.
temporarily.
Before you do that, would you like to make sure you got all AC loads you don't need isolated from the bus?
Nah, let's not do that right now, Flight. I think we're in good shape that way. The main A is up high enough where it can handle the inverter.
Well, the thing that concerns me is throwing equipment. We had a problem. We don't know the cause of the problem.
Flight, I've got a feeling we've lost 2 fuel cells. I hate to put it that way, but I don't know why we've lost them. It doesn't all tag up. And it's not an instrumentation problem, the best I can tell right now.
Okay, and something is giving us the rates, Jack, both in pitch and roll. So I'm suspecting that maybe it's whatever it is that's venting back there. I've had to use direct in order to stabilize this, and as soon as I do, we're starting to pick up rates again. Can you pick up any jet firing?
Stand by.
Whatever was venting seemed to be actively pushing the spacecraft around, explaining the constant RCS thruster firing. Swigert would have to use the manual controls multiple times in order to counteract the venting.
What direction are your rates in, Jack?
It's negative pitch and negative roll.
That's for GNC. What's firing now? You got something firing?
Well, we've seen quite a bit of thruster activity.
Okay, I guess this kills the PTC too, because we're not going to get into PTC as long as we got something venting.
The gauges that were knocked out by the power outage are now a concern for the ground crew. They could see the main bus B that was powering them is now offline, but main A still works. They would need to connect the working bus with the now offline sensors.
Flight Econ?
Go, Econ.
I got a little correction. Let's put inverter 1 on both AC buses, please.
Inverter 1 on both AC. Why?
Confirm. So I can get some AC bus power back, so I can have some insight into my AC bus 2 telemetry, especially my cryos. Maybe the venting may be coming from that.
You want to put inverter 1 on both AC buses. Ecom and Capcom, let's do it.
The idea was simple. One inverter could power both buses, and they could use that to power the gauges on AC bus 2 that are now offline. This would supply power to the gauges inside of the cryo tanks, and that would allow the crew to read the tank's real pressures.
13, Houston, we need to get some more instrumentation up. We'd like you to put inverter 1 on both AC buses, over.
Okay, you got inverter 1 on both AC buses now.
Telmu and control from flight.
Go, Flight.
Will you take a look at your pre-launch data and go through your system, see if there's anything you've got that may have started venting here?
Roger, Flight.
Okay, and I want to report on that in about the next 15 minutes. Quick look type stuff.
Okay.
Flight Fido.
Go, Fido.
We're definitely seeing a vent in the data.
Okay. Have you got any thrusters firing?
We're looking at that C3 thruster, Flight. It looks like it stays on most of the time.
Well, can we turn them all off and see if we still got the rates or any buildup in rates?
Well, the rate that we're seeing is opposite to the direction of that thruster, so if anything, it's just trying to hold and not quite up to it.
Okay, but
He's been trying to counteract the rates with direct. He's been getting a negative pitch and a negative roll.
okay.
But he asked if we were getting some thruster firings that were not being made by him.
I'll tell you what, GNC, can you get somebody in the back room to try to figure out what the equivalent delta V is we're getting so that we can see if we can backtrack to see if we can figure out what's venting. Econ from flight, what did, okay, you got 2 good AC buses. What did all that tell you now?
It tells me that, well, just give me about 2 more minutes, Flight.
Okay, take your time.
Okay, 13, we've got lots and lots of people working on this. We'll get you some dope as soon as we have it, and you'll be the first one to know.
Yeah, the crew did report they removed fuel cell 3. They open-circuited it also, didn't they?
I don't believe so.
Fuel cell 1 and fuel cell 3 should be open-circuited.
We just had our last call for fuel cell 1 open circuit, and we left fuel cell 3 as it was.
Well, let's take this open circuit fuel cell 3.
Open circuit fuel cell 3.
Get it off the bus. We got to worry about getting some power on main B to get the pressure back up in O2 tank 1.
Roger.
Flight econ?
Go econ.
Let's have them isolate the surge tank also and save it, and we use the cryo as much as we can.
Say that again?
Let's isolate the surge tank
Why
in the
that?
command module.
I don't understand that, Si.
I want to use the cryo as much as possible.
But that would seem to be the opposite if you want to keep the fuel cell going.
The surge tank is an oxygen tank located inside of the command module. The crew needs to use this for re-entry with Earth after separation from the service module. In emergency cases like this one, it can supply oxygen to other parts of the spacecraft like the fuel cells to keep them alive, which it's currently doing. An incredible amount of foresight is used to make the call to isolate the tank in order to save the oxygen for re-entry, but ensuring the imminent death of the spacecraft's only remaining source of electricity.
The fuel cells are fed off the tanks in the service module flight. The surge tank is in the command module. We want to save the surge tank, which we need for entry.
Okay, I'm with you.
Roger.
Capcom, let's also isolate the surge tank.
Okay, you want to isolate the surge tank?
Yeah.
O2 surge tank, right?
Yeah, what we're really doing is securing our entry systems right now.
13 Houston, we'd like you to isolate your O2 surge tank. Over.
Surge tank off now, Jack.
Flight econ?
Go econ.
Okay, since O2 tank 1 heaters are on main A, and we've got them off now, we'll be able to stand the 5 amps temporarily for a manual pressurization. Let's have them turn the heaters on manually in O2 tank 1.
O2
and we'll watch the pressure.
Tank 1.
A heater is activated inside of oxygen tank 1 in hopes of raising its pressures and helping the fuel cells.
Capcom, we want to get cryo O2 tank number 1 heater on.
Roger, we copy them, and we'd like to build up the pressure in O2 tank 1, so turn the heaters on manually. We'll watch the pressure for you.
You can stand the 5 amps on main A.
That's firm. We think so, Flight.
Okay, you want we're going to get a main bus A undervolt, probably.
Roger, we realize that. We feel we can stand 5 more amps on it.
Okay, heater tank 1 is on.
Did you see your 5 amp increase in current there, Ecom?
That's firm, Flight.
Okay.
26.7 volts, looks good. We'll watch the pressure. Flight Ecom?
Go ahead, Ecom.
I want the fans on and O2 tank 1, we're not seeing a pressure increase. We can stand it.
You can stand it?
That's firm.
Ground control can see the power is being used by the heaters, but the pressure doesn't increase in the tanks like they were expecting. The cryo fans are activated to try to get a better reading on that tank.
13 Houston, we'd like you to additionally bring on the fans in O2 tank 1, and we can stand the additional amperage on that.
Okay.
Flight Econ.
Go ahead, Econ.
The pressure in O2 tank 1 is all the way down to 297. We better think about getting in the LEM, or using the LEM systems. I'm going to have to power way down. I don't know if I'm going to be able to save the O2 for the third fuel cell. For fuel cell 2, rather.
Tell me you from Flight. Go ahead, Flight. I want you to get some guys figuring out minimum power in the LEM to sustain life. Roger. Okay.
Everything that ground control tries to raise the pressure in the working oxygen tank fails. The gauges that they had powered up in that tank are reading that it has been rapidly draining since the explosion. They begin to calculate how long their oxygen supply will last under these conditions.
Jack, looking outside, the number of particles has diminished greatly, almost ceased now, which indicates maybe what it was venting has almost stopped.
Roger, Jack. Thank you. We copy.
Any more suggestions in trying to pump up O2 tank 1 pressure?
No. Flight, we're going to hit 100 psi in an hour and 54 minutes. That's the end right there.
The command service module's oxygen system requires a pressure of at least 100 psi to function properly. If the oxygen pressure goes below that threshold, the fuel cells stop working altogether.
Fido from Flight.
Go ahead, Flight.
Whatever planning you do, I want to do assuming that we're going around the moon and we're using the LEM for performing the maneuver, because in the present configuration, unless we get a heck of a lot smarter, I think we're wasting our time planning and using the SPS.
Okay, Flight.
So I think all of our return to Earth type planning should be assuming the use of the LEM, DIPS, and or RCS. And I think third priority down the line should be CSM RCS.
Okay, and I'm assuming you'd want fastest possible return.
Yeah, I think that's the case.
Okay, we'll work on it from that sideline flight.
Okay.
Should be no problem.
The flight director does not like the idea of firing the service module's main engine. They could tell whatever was causing these issues came from the service module, and its effects were severe enough that firing the engine in a now unknown state carried significant risk. If the engine or parts of its nozzle were punctured, the main engine could now be another bomb just waiting to go off. The difficulty of starting the service module's engine and guidance system in a now powered down state added to the uncertainty. The safest possible option was switching entirely to using the lunar module. It has its own oxygen, electrical, and guidance systems, and most importantly, its own engine. Ground Control's new task was to use an emergency protocol designed for the failure of the service propulsion system engine as a guide to power up and maneuver the lunar module with the command service module still attached.
Flight Ecom?
Go ahead, Ecom.
Okay, listen, there is a possibility that we blew a O2 line in one of the fuel cells, and it's effectively manifolded there, of course. Now, I want to shut off one of the reactant valves to one of the fuel cells, and that would be fuel cell 3, since its O2 pressure is gone. Now, fuel cell 1's O2 pressure is trying to stay up there at 45 psi. Maybe the problem is in fuel cell 3.
That sounds like a good assumption right there.
Yeah, fuel cell 3 is lost anyway as far as
Flight GNC.
Go, GNC.
Turn Charlie 1 thruster off.
You want to turn Charlie 1 off? Why?
Well, it looks like we're getting a lot of firing out for no reason.
Okay, Capcom. Recommend thruster C1 2 off.
Excuse me, Fred. I'd like to butt in here a minute. We'd like to have thruster C1 off.
C1 is off.
Ecom from Flight. You want to shut off both reactant valves to fuel cell number 3?
It does it anyway, Flight.
Okay.
And the inline heater's off in fuel cells 1 and 3, please.
What we're supposing here, Capcom, is we may have had some problem in fuel cell number 3, since that's the one that's reading no O2 right now. And we may be losing our O2 through fuel cell number 3, the O2 manifold, in as much as they're manifolded together commonly. Looks like the O2 and fuel cell 1 and 2 seem to be trying to stay up there. And fuel cell 3 looks like it's the oddball here. Capcom, let's close the reactant valve to fuel cell number 3.
Okay, close reactant valve to fuel cell number 3. And you're saying that 1 and 2 look okay?
Well, what it looks like the pressure's trying to stay up there, and this is the best guess we've got right now, because we got to stop this O2 flow.
Okay, 13, this is Houston. It appears to us that we're losing O2 flow through fuel cell 3. So we want you to close the react valve on fuel cell 3. It looks like fuel cell 1 and 2 are trying to hold up okay.
Most of Ground Control's attention is focused on stopping the remaining tank from losing the rest of its breathable oxygen. They try shutting off the valves that lead to the fuel cells in case the oxygen had been leaking through them, along other measures. What they didn't know is that these attempts would be entirely futile in stopping the remaining oxygen tank from completely draining. The tank that had exploded was located right next to the now draining tank, and somewhere within the pipework leading from that tank, something had been jolted far enough to break a seal or a pipe open. The venting was the crew seeing their own oxygen from the only tank left in the service module.
Flight GNC.
Go, GNC.
Some more jet reconfiguration to see if we can hold the attitude.
Okay.
I'd like to turn Charlie 2 off.
Well, why are we interested in holding attitude? If we're not venting, why not drift for a while? That'd probably be better from a standpoint of thermal control anyway, wouldn't it?
Well, I think we'd like to get into a control drift rather than just some random things like that.
Ecom, have you deduced anything? Have you seen your reactant valves go off? Have you seen flow cease?
Can't tell, Flight.
Yeah.
They're open circuited, and the pressure still appears to be going down.
Yeah.
Okay, Flight, we have our checkpoint.
Okay. All flight controllers, I'd suggest you start handing over, because I think a fresh team is probably going to be thinking clearer. I think the rest of us can continue working in some other function in support of the new team coming on. Okay. Let me go back over this again. We're handing over to Glenn. I'd suggest a white team goes back and starts going through the D-log of the data. In other words, let's see if we can go back to the initial conditions and work in that problem to see if we can find out what happened, and we may find some better clues as to what to do, and let the fresh guys come on and try to figure out where do we go from here.
The scheduled time for the ground control crew switchover had arrived. Although the currently serving white team would have to run the incoming black team through a lot of information, having a fresh pair of eyes look over the problems could help reveal other issues they had missed. The white team would continue to help troubleshoot in the background.
Ecom, I don't like the way that O2 pressure's going down. If you want to do something about these other reactant valves, let's make up our mind.
Flight Ecom.
Go ahead.
Okay, on the reactants for fuel cell 1, seems to me we have no choice but to go ahead and do it. The pressure continues to drop. We're not going to have anything left soon anyway. So it looks like the next best thing to try is to go ahead and turn the reactants off on fuel cell 1.
And Houston 13, O2 tank pressure number 1 is less than 300 now.
Roger, we're seeing that. We confirm it.
Yeah, we copy that. Tell them we're debating shutting off the reactants on 1.
Flight Ecom.
Go ahead.
The temperature is the only thing we have.
And does it correlate?
Pretty closely.
You're saying that I'm looking at a valid pressure in that tank and it's still going down.
That's the way it looks like.
Therefore,
we need to go to fuel cell 1 and turn off the reactant.
Capcom, fuel cell 1 reactants.
Because
the tank 1 is still going down. Pressure and temp. Pressure going down, temperature confirms it.
Okay.
13 Houston, we're going to have you go through the shutdown procedure on fuel cell 1. Our O2 pressure is going down, as you note, and the temperature confirms it.
Okay, Jack, we're proceeding with the shutdown procedure for fuel cell 1.
Ecom flight.
Go ahead, Flight.
Does the temperature in tank 2 correspond to the pressure reading?
Let me see how close it is, Flight. Flight Ecom.
Go.
Temperature and the pressure correspond. They're verifying that the pressure is reading right.
In tank 2?
That's right, Flight. Tank 2.
Okay, now, is it possible that we still have that tank and it's good? And we could somehow get power on B and use it?
It's not likely, Flight.
What's not likely, Clint?
It's not likely to be able to actually have anything left in the tank.
You don't think so?
I don't think so, but we'll pulse that one too.
All right.
Let me get you a time it looks like we've got on tank 1 here.
All right. Tell me, you Flight.
Go, Flight.
Is there anything simple that we can refer the crew to get them thinking about using the LEM here? Have you got anything in the checklist paperwork to describe to them what your intentions are?
Negative, there's nothing documented in contingency. We're thinking about using the LEM as a lifeboat. We have some procedures here on the ground, though.
I'm sure you do. What do they amount to? Flying with the tunnel open?
Raj, just a LEM, low power load, supplying power to the CSM.
Supplying power to the CSM?
Yes, about 5 amps.
To what?
To their main bus B.
Okay, main B is in bad shape. We don't have anything on main B right now. What's that power for? Tell me.
Just anything they might need for.
Okay, Jack, it looks like O2 tank 1 pressure is just a hair over 200.
We confirm that here, and temperature also confirms it.
Okay, does it look like it's still going down?
It's slowly going to 0, and we're starting to think about LEM lifeboat.
Flight Ecom.
Go ahead.
Okay, got an update on the time. Looks like we got about 18 minutes until we get down to 100 PSI, and that's sort of the cutoff point.
All right, but we're charging battery A.
Well, that doesn't mean much in 18 minutes, though, but we're doing all we can do.
All right. Ecom Flight.
Wait, Flight.
Let me try one more time. Is it possible that if we got power to main B, that we could get tank 2 powered up and up in pressure?
13 Houston.
We don't feel like that's a possibility, Flight. We might conceivably get power to B, but we don't feel like we can get anything out of tank 2.
Okay, now why is that? Tell me why. I'm just
because the numbers we're looking at indicate that it's essentially ambient.
All gone. Ecom Flight.
Go, Flight.
How long have we got now on the cell?
The last account had 18 minutes. Let me get an update.
Okay, tell me, what do we got to do to power up to get some comm on the LEM?
Okay, fine. We've got a procedure here that gets power first on the LEM.
We figure we've got about 15 minutes worth of power left in the command module, so we want you to start getting over in the LEM and getting some power on that.
This is Apollo Control at 57 hours 46 minutes ground elapsed time. The black team of flight controllers is now on station in Mission Control Center looking at possible alternate missions, as we have an apparent serious oxygen leak in the cryogenic oxygen in the service module. And now in the process of powering down the command module. Less than 15 minutes remaining of electrical power to the CSM. Sometime later in the mission, It is expected that they would return to the free return trajectory, which they left yesterday in the mid-course correction burn number 2. Returning to the alternate mission now being considered. At this point in the translunar coast, it is cheaper and swifter to coast on around the moon and come back to Earth than it is to do a deep space abort. Continuing to monitor air ground from Apollo 13, this is Apollo Control.
Both oxygen tanks failing in the service module meant the death of all 3 of its fuel cells as well. With less than 15 minutes of electricity remaining, the decision is made to power up the lunar module. The crew would tap into the oxygen tanks and batteries inside of the lunar module, intended to keep a crew of 2 people alive on the surface of the moon for 2 days. It now needed to keep a crew of 3 alive for 4. All 3 fuel cells failing meant that the crew would have significantly less water and electricity than planned for the rest of the mission. The crew would soon begin to struggle with their short supply of both of these resources as a result.
And Jack, have y'all got good LEM data down there now?
That's affirmative, Fred. We're getting good LEM data.
Okay, everybody, look, we got a number of long-range problems right now. We have the burn to do, which is at about 79 hours, 28 hours from now. But right now, I want the guys here in the room to concentrate on keeping this thing right now going along all right and watch it.
This is Apollo Control. 58 hours, 46 minutes ground elapsed time. Lovell and Hayes still powering up the lunar module in preparation for what turns out to be an alternate mission in which no lunar landing will be possible. In about 20 minutes in the Houston News Center, there will be a press conference in the small briefing room.
A press conference is held in order to inform the media of the developing situation. The explosion had turned this mission from a little-known event into a major fiasco. The media and public would begin to tune in and find out about the precarious situation the crew now find themselves in.
Participants in the forthcoming press conference within the next 15 minutes or so will be Manned Spacecraft Center Deputy Director Christopher C. Kraft Jr., Apollo Spacecraft Program Office Manager James A. McDivitt, and MSC Director Flight Operations Sigurd Schoberg. This will be in the small briefing room in the Houston News Center.
I guess I really, there are a lot of things that could have happened. It would be just pure conjecture. Anything that's down there that's pressurized could have let go, and there are all kinds of pressurized things. There are pressurized hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, fuel cells. It's a very complicated bay that this happened in.
Can you get them back? Taking into consideration all the imponderables, the power, the oxygen, the landing area, and all this sort of thing, is this?
If the situation remains stable as it is at the moment, there's no question but what we have the thing under control and we can return the crew safely to the Earth. Now, we're going to have to make some compromises and procedures as how you do that. If everything remains as is, we can get them back successfully. Now, if there was some change in the status of the lunar module, then that might mean something else, and we will keep you appraised of that situation.
Jim, I'm not clear on what the venting did to the spacecraft's attitude and pitch roll in yaw.
Well, he had a negative pitch and a negative roll, and that's one of the clues that we had that something happened in Bay 4, in addition to the fact that we had all these other anomalies to the equipment that's in there. It meant that it was pitching nose down and it was rolling to the left.
I think the other thing you have to remember is that we have certain instrumentation that we can believe or not believe. I mean by that when you have something like this happen, you don't know that you're not reading false information from some of the instruments. So you have to look at those and see how they failed, etc., and see what the measurements are, see which direction they went when they began to fail to see whether you're reading true information.
All right, this one, and then we're going to come back on. Chris, could you put this in a somewhat larger perspective? It seems obviously that if this happened on the way back, the situation would be critical. I mean, it would be fatal.
Indeed it would.
You discuss this thing from the standpoint of the resources you're left with when it fails at this point in the mission.
Well, any time that you still have the lunar module in the condition that we have it in this case, where we've not used any of its consumables, then we're in a very good situation. We've always called the LEM a good lifeboat under those circumstances.
If at any time in the mission, however, the LEM had separated and we had gotten ourselves into a rendezvous situation or the command module being around the moon, then what you state is absolutely true. It would be a fatal situation.
I know it's probably a little premature, but seeing they have had a rough time, have you worked out any schedules for a sleep period for any of the astronauts?
No, I think this is a little premature for that.
Forgive me if I put you on the spot, but how would you classify this situation as regards to these that we are familiar with a little bit?
I'd say this is as serious a situation as we have ever had in manned spaceflight.
Did the fact that you went into a hybrid trajectory yesterday, pulling you out of free return, is that going to cause you any troubles in trying to get back around the moon?
No, as I said earlier, we're not on a free return right now, but it would only take a maneuver of about 20 to 40 feet per second to get you back on a free return. That could be done in, say, 5 or 10 hours from now.
We're going to continue to schedule these briefings throughout the mission whenever there's a point where we think interpretation would help, and we'll be back again, but I think we ought to get back to mission control now.
Quick one. If you went...
To back up and recap the earlier maneuver pad or information regarding a descent propulsion system abort for minimum return time, this maneuver, should it be done, would come at 79 hours, 25 minutes, 26 seconds ground elapsed time at an altitude above the moon at 205 nautical miles. The maneuver would be 1,797.7 feet per second posigrade, a burn time of 8 minutes 35 seconds. Would produce entry interface at about 133 hours ground elapsed time. Apollo 13 is now 185,455 nautical miles out from Earth. Velocity showing on the display here in Mission Control, 3,118 feet per second. We're continuing to stand by at 59 hours 53 minutes ground elapsed time. This is Apollo Control.
Ground Control begins calculating a single burn that will speed up the spacecraft's return journey and put it onto a free return trajectory. The burn is planned for 2 hours past the closest approach to the moon.
Okay, Houston, Aquarius, how do you read?
Hello there, Aquarius. Loud and clear. How do you read me?
There's an awful lot of background. Okay, we got a lot of background static, Jack. You're down in the mud. You having ground problems? You're unreadable, Jack. We got a signal stress meter right now. It keeps wavering up and down. The best I'm getting is about 2.4 AGC.
The crew begins experiencing another unexpected challenge. The lunar module's communication systems use the same frequency as the third stage, which had been ejected earlier in the mission. The third stage had the same communication system as the lunar module so that ground control could measure its position in space. It had been intended that the lunar module wouldn't have been powered up before the crew got to the moon, giving the third stage time to crash into the moon and avoiding any interference. The unexpected change in plans, however, had the crew power up the lunar module onto the same frequency that the third stage had already been using. This gave the crew great difficulty in hearing the ground control, although it was not impossible.
Flight income.
Go ahead.
They're having trouble grabbing a hold of the S4B to push it out of the way is what the problem is.
Okay, well, we had comm before. Can we get back to there?
That's what we're trying to do, and we're not having any luck. There's one suggestion we can do. We can turn the LEM transceiver completely off for about 2 to 3 minutes and let them grab a hold of the S4B, push it out of the way, and then bring it back up.
Is that what we have to do now? We can't talk to them to tell them to do that.
That's right. But if we can get a burblap in here, just say, turn your transceiver off for 3 minutes. Then turn it back on.
And go flight.
Go ahead.
Is that our best step now to get comm back?
That's our best step, right.
Capcom, give him that. We'll try.
He's not going to hear you fly right now.
Ground Control came up with an interesting solution to this problem. The frequency that the lunar module and third stage used was not fixed like a standard radio station. Instead, the communication systems read the incoming frequency from the ground stations on Earth and transmitted a matching frequency at a ratio of 240 to 221. This is done because the spacecraft is moving away from the ground stations with enough velocity that the Doppler effect of the spacecraft's radio transmissions can be used to measure its velocity and distance. The ground stations transmit a known frequency, and the return frequency will differ depending on how fast the spacecraft is traveling. Ground control can measure how far off the return frequency is to Earth's transmitted frequency and gather this useful information. By matching the frequency that the spacecraft sees from ground control, they can double the effective distance of the Doppler effect, giving them a more accurate reading of the spacecraft's velocity. They will use this feature to send a signal to the third stage, dragging its frequency away from the lunar modules. In order for the lunar module's communication systems to not also be altered by this frequency change, ground control asks the crew to switch off their communication system for 3 minutes. Ground control knew the crew got their message when their communications turned off moments later. This gave ground control their opportunity to drag the frequency of the third stage away and then lock back onto the lunar module. With the radio frequencies now far enough apart to avoid interference, the important communication issue was resolved.
Flight Inco.
Go ahead.
It looks like you got it.
Comm, Jack. Okay, everybody, let's be quiet. We have comm.
Hello there, Aquarius.
We've got a lot of business to do.
Hello, Houston, Aquarius. How do you read?
Hello there, Aquarius. Loud and clear. How me now?
Okay, we're reading you loud and clear, Jack. I hope it stays this time.
Ground control had been calculating the resources they would have on the return journey given their single planned burn at 79 hours. The numbers that come back do not look good. Unless major changes are made, the crew will run out of water in 31 hours. With their planned trajectory, it will take over 70 to return to Earth. The decision is made to shut down the primary guidance and navigation system, a computer that uses water to cool itself. By shutting down the guidance computer, the spacecraft will lose its orientation in space but conserve that crucial water. Because of this, ground control wants the crew to get into a free return trajectory now while the guidance computer is still powered up. They plan to shut off the computer after they enter a free return trajectory, and they will do a secondary burn after they've rounded the moon to speed up their return home. This new trajectory plan was not without its own challenges. The descent propulsion system on the lunar module was only designed to be fired one time. Now they were planning 2 burns carrying significantly more weight and in a configuration that the lunar module had not been designed for. The crew would also be without their primary guidance and navigation system during their second burn. Plans were considered in which the crew would eject their now dead service module to save weight and speed up the return, but this would involve exposing the command module's heat shield to deep space for an extended period of time, something it had not been designed to do.
Okay, we'd like to brief you on what our plan is. We're at this time water critical in the LEM, so we'd like to use as little as possible. To do this, we're going to plan to make a free return maneuver of 16 feet per second at 61 hours, which is 37 minutes from now. Then we're going to power down the pings. At 79 hours, we'll go ahead and make another abort maneuver to kick what we got, but we'd like to get that pings powered down as soon as possible. Okay, the only item on page 10 is to deploy the landing gear.
Okay, we'll do that now.
Control, you want that done, right?
Affirmative.
Okay, stand by for landing gear. Okay, let's watch the pyro and the landing gear there, gentlemen.
Okay, power's fired. It looks like landing gear deployed from here, flight.
Roger, Aquarius, and you go for the burn. Okay, Aquarius, you're looking good.
Auto shut down.
And Aquarius, for your information, we now have 136-mile perigee, confirmed by Doppler.
Okay, 136-mile perigee now. That's very nice. Oh, wait a minute, Jack. Did you say parasentian or perigee?
I meant parasentian.
Oh, that's better.
The emergency plan to use the lunar module's engine had worked. They're now on a free return trajectory. The crew shuts off the guidance and navigation computer that had been consuming their limited supply of water.
Okay, Jim, and looks like what we have to do is, in order to maintain even heating, we just have to yaw the whole machine about 90 degrees per hour in increments. So we'll give you a call when it's time to yaw 90 degrees.
Ground control came up with a compromise for the passive thermal control. The lunar module had no procedures to be able to set up a passive thermal control role, but they could still orient the spacecraft using the reaction control thrusters. The plan was to periodically rotate the entire spacecraft and then hold that new attitude until their next thermal control maneuver, where they would rotate again. It wouldn't be as smooth as a normal passive thermal control roll, but manually rotating the spacecraft every once in a while would have the same effect.
To recap briefly the situation with Apollo 13, the crew in the last hour was passed up a paracynthion plus 2 hours maneuver, which actually is primarily a speed-up maneuver to get them back to Earth somewhat earlier than the normal free return would bring them.
Although a free return trajectory had been successfully established, the crew was not out of the woods. They still had one more burn planned for 2 hours past the closest approach to the moon. Right now, they're on a trajectory to land in the Indian Ocean 76 hours from now. This posed complications with recovery considering the intended landing site was planned to be the Pacific Ocean on the opposite side of the planet. With water consumption at an absolute minimum, the crew was still projected to run out of water 5 hours before landing. This burn would speed up their return, landing 10 hours sooner. Landing sooner would help their water supply issue and meant that the Earth would be in a different point in its rotation, placing the landing point for Apollo 13 conveniently right back in the Pacific Ocean. They would spend most of their time preparing for this burn. Extreme measures are taken in order to conserve the lunar module's limited resources. One of those measures is to switch off the lunar module's radio amplifier. This helps conserve electricity at the cost of making their communications with Earth far noisier. Under usual circumstances, each crew member would be drinking about 30 ounces of water per day. They would need to reduce their intake to just 6, 1/5 of their normal amount. The moon is tidally locked with Earth, meaning only one side will ever be shown to us. Today, the crew of Apollo 13 will join an extremely small group of people who have seen the far side of the moon with their own eyes. They will also be able to see the moon's surface in detail from just 164 miles away. The crew prepares their film and color cameras to capture this flyby. The spacecraft is now well within the moon's sphere of influence. The film photographs the crew manages to capture from the far side of the moon show its craters in incredible detail. This is only tempered by the fact they'd be preparing to land there had the explosion not happened yet. Because of the unusual situation and trajectory of this mission, Apollo 13 would set the record for the furthest distance humans have ever been from Earth. 249,205 miles, a record that still stands to this day.
It's Apollo Control Houston, 77 hours, 38 minutes into the flight. Apollo 13 has now rounded the corner, headed back towards Earth. We show a velocity of 7,062 feet per second, and a distance from the moon of 566 nautical miles. We presently show Apollo 13 1,007 nautical miles away from the moon. Its velocity slowing down now relative to the moon, now reading 6,399 feet per second. Apollo Control Houston, 77 hours, 52 minutes now into the flight. We show 5 minutes away now from time of predicted impact of the S-4B.
The third stage's collision course with the moon ends with an impact on the lunar surface traveling 2.58 kilometers per second. This leaves a 30-meter wide crater in the lunar surface. The energy from this impact rings the moon like a bell. A seismometer placed 5 months earlier by Apollo 12 picks up the seismic waves from the impact 85 miles away. This provides data about both the moon's composition and calibration of the seismometer. This is one of the few scientific goals Apollo 13 would be able to accomplish.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're no longer 139 miles. We're leaving.
It is now 2 hours past the closest approach to the moon. The time for the second lunar module burn had arrived. The first burn lasted for 14 seconds. This one will last for 4.5 minutes, speeding up by a planned 861 feet per second.
Jim, you are go for the burn. Go for the burn.
Roger, understand. Go for the burn.
Less than 30 seconds away. The engine is armed, standing by. Ground confirms ignition.
We're burning 40%.
Houston copies.
Attitude looks good at this point.
Whereas Houston, you're looking good.
Roger.
1 minute now into the burn. Dips is looking good. 2 minutes into the burn.
Chris, you were looking good at 2 minutes. Still looking good.
2 minutes, Roger.
Velocity building up. Disky shows we've gained 451 feet per second at this time. The onboard display shows less than a minute to go in the burn now. Coming up on 4 minutes into the burn.
Shut down.
Roger, shut down.
That was Commander Jim Lovell reporting shut down. The engine is off. We're at 79 hours, 32 minutes into the flight.
I say that was a good burn.
The second burn was successful. Their return to Earth will now be 10 hours sooner and in a much better place for recovery. Although the crew had enough oxygen to breathe in, what they were breathing out would start to be more of a concern. The lunar module's smaller lithium hydroxide canisters were designed to scrub the carbon dioxide of 2 people. With 3, the levels of carbon dioxide slowly rise within the spacecraft and would reach dangerous levels if nothing is changed. Ground Control had been aware of this issue since they had shut down the larger CO2 scrubbers in the command module, which were designed to support 3 people. Fortunately, both scrubbers worked in the same way. By dragging carbon dioxide over lithium hydroxide canisters, the chemicals would react with the CO2, trapping it, letting cleaner air pass through. This would gradually scrub the CO2 from the spacecraft's atmosphere, making it safe to breathe. Unfortunately, the canisters are different shapes. The command module's canisters are large cubes, while the canisters on the lunar module are cylindrical and smaller. They are not compatible with each other. Ground Control knew this would be an issue and had been working on a solution to be able to use the command module's larger CO2 scrubber in place of the lunar module's smaller one. They would need to build an airtight adapter using only the resources on board to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Okay, Houston, we just got a mass alarm at a ECS light. I take it the partial pressure CO2 is, yeah, that's what tripped it.
Aquarius Houston, say again.
The CO2 inside the spacecraft has reached a high enough concentration to start setting off alarms.
The master alarm on the CO2 canister was expected to occur at some point in the flight, the return flight.
There she goes, gang.
This is Apollo Control at 83 hours 11 minutes. A change of shift press briefing is being planned to begin in about 10 minutes at 12:35 a.m. in the main auditorium at the Houston News Center. The participants in the press conference will be Flight Team Flight Director Gene Kranz and astronaut Tony England.
Could we have a rather detailed explanation of the tests that were run in the simulations with the lithium hydroxide canisters and a description of how this hose is being attached or will be attached to a canister, and particularly what hose that is? Where does it come from and what's going through it?
Tony's got that and he brought you over one of the canisters.
This is our mailbox. As you know, we use the lithium hydroxide to scrub CO2 out of the spacecraft atmosphere. Okay, I'll talk more directly into it. We have a limited amount of lithium hydroxide in the LEM, and it would relieve a lot of the pressure on the environmental control system if we could use some of the canisters, lithium hydroxide canisters from the command module. So actually Jim Corielli over in Crew Support Division who designed this thing, and it does an excellent job. What we do is we use the suit loop in the LEM, and this is the scavenging hose, the exhaust hose, if you will, from the suit. And we just put the lithium hydroxide canister on the end of it, and it's not so easy to fasten on there. We've used a data card out of the flight plan to make a structure so that the plastic cover here won't collapse on the end of the hose. The canister itself is coated with Teflon, and none of our flight tape would stick to it, so he designed sort of a grid system that goes around it that allows us to fasten things to it. And we've had one of these running for about 3 hours over in the 11-foot chamber in Crew Systems, and all indications are that it's doing the job. I understand that we have about 16 cartridges in the command module, and each one will have a lifetime of about 12 hours. And we'll be running 2 at a time, 1 on each of the suit loops and the LEM.
We were told before the burn that 2 people would be in the LEM and 1 would be in the command module. And later on I got a part of a quote which seems to indicate that maybe that wasn't the case. This quote was, "He's the only CMP that's ever witnessed a dips burn sitting on the SN engine can," which would lead one to believe that all 3 of them were in the LEM at the time of the burn.
Yeah, this is a interesting item. Yeah, all 3 crew members were in the LEM at the time of the burn, and we had computed our dips gimbal trim position for the man in the command and service module spacecraft, which caused a center of gravity movement that caused the engine gimbals to compensate for the fact he was in there. So we saw that excursion, and then once we found out that, yeah, we had a CMP in the LEM spacecraft, we knew why the excursion.
Okay, let's take Art Schneider. Oh, yeah, followed up with one card.
Would you care to speculate why all 3 of them got together in the LEM at that time?
I think the 3rd man wanted to see what was going on.
The sounds of all the work that is going on and is still going on, this flight's probably a lot bigger test of the system on the ground than up here.
Yeah, you've been working it out a little bit. Well, everybody down here is 100% optimistic. Looks like we're on the upside of the whole thing now.
Ground Control passes up a procedure that will allow the crew to use the lunar module to set up a proper passive thermal control roll rather than relying on the manual 90-degree turn.
How'd you like to spend a week on an aircraft carrier getting back?
If I can get on an aircraft carrier, I don't care how long it takes, Jack.
Ground Control must verbally guide the crew through building the adapter to fit the command module's CO2 scrubber into the lunar module's air intake.
Okay, I think the equipment you'll need will be 2 command module lithium hydroxide canisters.
The crew constructs 2 adapters using Ground Control's verbal guidance. This improvised solution would be known as the mailbox from its shape. The crew no longer had to rely on the lunar module's limited CO2 scrubbing capabilities, and now had access to more than enough lithium hydroxide canisters to last them the rest of the journey.
Okay, when I was upstairs just a minute ago, I noticed what appeared to be some new venting from down the service module way. I noticed it out window 1, and also saw one chunk of metal, loose metal, about 4 inches square that was tumbling around, silver in color. It looked like it had come from somewhere down in the service module. So I'm looking out the LEM window now, and I see a good part of the new star field that's created for us. Just about 1,000 little sparklies out here.
Fred Hayes looks out of the windows and notices something venting, coming from the same area as the initial accident.
Think of any normal venting phenomena that might occur, like maybe a hydrogen tank that's overpressurized or relieving or something like that?
Yeah, we thought of that, Jim. We heated up that tank and we haven't been using any hydrogen, and therefore it could be venting in the overboard relief.
It's believed that with the side panel of the service module blown off, the nearly full hydrogen tanks would be directly exposed to the sun for long enough that they would start to pressurize and vent through a relief valve. Given the electrically dead service module, the sensors and telemetry that would help diagnose an event like this would also be dead. The crew and ground control are completely blind to the true state of the command service module and would have very little information to find out what's venting now.
Yeah, I hate to say it, Jack, but I think our PTC is starting to wobble off a little bit. I've noticed that the Earth is coming by somewhat lower in the window, and the Moon is going by somewhat higher.
Okay, understand PTC, Earth is coming by lower and Moon is coming by higher.
Whatever seemed to be venting would start to throw off their passive thermal control roll, slowly adding its own wobble and precession.
Okay, we're considering a mid-course correction at 104 hours, about 20 hours from now. 18 hours from now.
Ground control notices the trajectory they're on would have them re-enter Earth at a slightly shallow angle. They plan another mid-course correction burn to bring their re-entry angle back to levels they're comfortable with.
We're looking at the sheet tank pressure rise, and we expect it to blow. We don't know exactly what time it'll go, somewhere around 105 hours or perhaps later than that. We've got plenty of blowdown capability, and we just thought you ought to be informed. Over.
The lunar module's engine worked by using helium to force fuel from its tanks into its engine. This helium was supplied from a supercritical helium tank inside of the lunar module. As the tank would be warmed by sunlight inside of the spacecraft, the pressure would slowly rise during the mission. To fix that, the tank was purposefully underfilled on the ground so that as the temperature rose inside the tank during the mission, the helium would be at the correct pressure to use the engine when they got to the moon. Under usual circumstances, the lunar module would land on the moon and vent this helium, stopping any possibility of an overpressure. Apollo 13's unplanned excursion meant that the lunar module's helium tanks would be consistently rising in temperature and pressure until a burst disc breaks. Fortunately, the lunar module's engine can still be used even after this helium burst disc breaks. Since the crew had already fired the lunar module's engine, helium would be trapped within the engine's fuel tanks that could be used to start it up again for a limited time. This feature is called blowdown. With the dead command service module, the lives of the crew are entirely reliant on the lunar module and its batteries. They need all of its systems to work and are in no position to deal with more unexpected challenges. The crew would not be so lucky.
Okay, Vance, I just heard a little thump, sounded like down in the descent stage, and saw a new shower of snowflakes come up that looked like they were emitted down that way.
We don't see anything wrong. For example, your sheet tank appears to be okay, as far as we can see.
Whatever blew in the lunar module's descent stage was not the helium tank. It would be a few hours earlier than expected, and the telemetry they could see told them the tank was still pressurized. The lunar module's descent stage contains 4 large batteries which power the spacecraft. It is believed that Battery 2's electrolyte leaked inside of the battery, creating a short circuit with itself in the magnesium battery casing. This short circuit through the electrolyte released oxygen and hydrogen gas from the electrolyte, which accumulated around the battery and then ignited. This created a large enough explosion for the crew to hear it, but it wasn't destructive enough to knock Battery 2 off the line. The snowflakes Fred Hayes were seeing were parts of his own spacecraft mixed with leaked battery electrolyte.
And Houston, Aquarius, looks like service module venting has ceased, at least momentarily.
How about the descent stage? Does Fred reported venting down there? Do you still see that?
No, Fred hasn't seen anything else in the descent stage.
Fortunately, the batteries would continue to function and the short circuit didn't seem to have any serious effects on them.
How does it feel, Jack?
I tell you, Deke, it's cold up in there. I don't know whether we'll be able to sleep up there tonight. It must be about 35 or 40 degrees.
Right, that's what I was worried about.
The emergency situation the spacecraft is in does not provide the crew with much comfort. Usually, part of the electricity the spacecraft would be using would warm up the spacecraft and make it comfortable to be in. With electricity usage at an absolute minimum, the spacecraft would plummet to temperatures as low as 40 degrees Fahrenheit or 4 Celsius. Many of the water-based foods like hot dogs have frozen solid. Water droplets from the astronaut's breath condense onto every surface, including the ones behind the control panels and in its wiring. The third mid-course correction burn is here. This one is a short burn that will help trim their re-entry angle into better margins.
I'll let you.
Ignition. Thrust looks good. Shut down.
470.
Got some other information. We should have some good dope on your trajectory in about 2 hours. Looked like to us that the burn was real good, however, and we're taking a close look at it, and we'll get back with you on that in about 2 hours from now. Another thing that we're expecting to have happen is that the sheet tank is going to reach its burst limit, and this is supposed to be a non-propulsive vent, but you might hear it and you might see something.
We're still watching the supercritical helium pressure aboard the LEM descent stage increase gradually. The pressure is now reading 1,937 pounds per square inch. And we see the pressure dropping at this time. The control officer reports that the burst disc has ruptured. We just, as we were making this announcement.
Anything?
Yeah, Jack, I was just about ready to call you. Underneath Quad 4, I noticed a lot of sparklies coming out.
Did you hear or feel anything?
No, I sure can, but I think it changed our PCC. I think we're probably going to have to reestablish PCC. Yeah, I was in a right yaw, and now I'm in a left yaw. At a much faster rate than the one we put in PCC.
The burst disk finally gives and vents the supercritical helium tank into space. This event pushes the spacecraft with enough force that not only does it stop the passive thermal control roll, but then reverses it at a much faster rate than they were originally spinning.
Roger, have you effectively established PTC in the opposite direction then?
Well, you can say that. I'm not too sure just what kind of pitch and roll I got coupled with the yaw. Is that what they call a non-propulsive vent?
Right, I'd hate to see a propulsive one.
Yeah, me both. Meanwhile, back to the drawing board of non-propulsive vent.
The supercritical helium burst disk ruptured at about 108 hours, 54 minutes, 40 seconds after reaching a pressure of 1,937 pounds per square inch. The pressure of the escaping gas, which was thought ahead of time to be was predicted to be a non-propulsive vent, turned out to be very much a propulsive vent. This rotational rate was stopped by the vent and started up again in the opposite direction. And it is now rotating about one revolution every 2 minutes. One revolution a little less than every 2 minutes, as compared with a revolution every 18 or 19 minutes in the opposite direction prior to the vent.
How's the temperature up there, Jack? You guys chopping wood to keep warm?
Deke, it's about 51, I think, or 50 in the LAM, and it's about, 45 or a little bit less in the command module.
Do you believe it's cold up there?
Yes, we used to call the command module the bedroom, and it's now the refrigerator.
The near freezing temperatures inside of the spacecraft, combined with one crew member on watch out at all times, would make it near impossible to get any meaningful amount of rest. By this point, 3 full days after the explosion, all crew members are exhausted and dehydrated. The rationing of water that the crew had been undergoing had its own ill effects as well. By the end of the mission, Fred Hayes would lose 6 pounds of body weight. Jack Swigert would lose 11 pounds, and Jim Lovell would lose 14. Fred Hayes would discover he developed a urinary tract infection that would later become a kidney infection. He would start feeling the chills in an already frozen spacecraft. A small burn with the reaction control thrusters is planned to bring the spacecraft into the best re-entry angle they could try to get.
Less than 2 minutes away now from scheduled time of ignition.
Yeah, it looks like we had a minus 0.2 bias, 470, we're burning.
Copy that, Fred.
Fred Hayes reporting that the burn is underway. We're at 137 hours, 40 minutes into the flight. Wave shut down.
Re-entry is fast approaching. The service module will be jettisoned before the lunar module, a first in the Apollo missions. Ejecting the service module will expose its true damage to the crew for the first time. The crew is prepared to capture this event on their cameras.
Copy that.
We copied that report from Jim Lovell of service module separation at 138 hours, 2 minutes, 8 seconds.
Do you see it, Jack? And there's one whole side of that spacecraft missing.
Is that right?
Right by the, look out there, Richard. Right by the high gate antenna, the whole panel is blown out, almost from the base to the engine.
Copy that.
Yeah, it looks like it got to the SPS bell too, Houston.
You can ding the SPS engine bell, huh?
Wait, look, that's just a dark brown streak. It's really a mess.
Was the bell deformed on the outside or just nicked or what?
I think the explosion, from what I can see, Joe, had fainted. I don't know whether it did any actual deformation or not.
Okay.
Man, that's unbelievable. Yeah, and Joe, it looks like a lot of debris is just hanging out to the side near the S-band antenna.
Roger, Jim.
The crew spends the next 3 hours preparing to jettison their lunar module. They will do so 1 hour before re-entry.
And you are go for pyro arm.
Real fine.
The damaged service module and their lunar module would burn up in Earth's atmosphere.
Okay, copy that. Farewell, Aquarius, and we thank you.
This is Apollo Control Houston at 141 hours, 31 minutes into the flight. We've had lunar module jettison.
You're looking good. We're real happy with the trajectory, and a minute ago we just lost contact with your friend Aquarius.
Okay. Where did she go?
Oh, I know. She's up there somewhere.
She sure was a good ship.
Hey, just as I said that, we got another burst of LEM data, so I guess it's still ticking.
Less than 7 minutes now from time of entry into the Earth's atmosphere.
Okay, we just had one last time around the room, and everybody says you're looking great.
Thank you.
Okay, LOS in a minute or a minute and a half. At entry attitude, we like Omni Charlie, and welcome home, over.
Thank you.
During re-entry, the spacecraft hits the atmosphere with enough velocity that it turns the surrounding air into plasma, which blocks any radio signals. This is a known event that will cause Apollo 13 to lose communications during their most intense phase of re-entry. This is known as loss of signal, or LOS.
Apollo Control Houston, we've just had loss of signal from Honeysuckle with Apollo 13. Our last velocity reading was 35,837 feet per second with a range to go of 1,791 nautical miles. The period of blackout for the spacecraft should have begun about 20 some odd seconds ago. We have about 1 minute to go now from time of end to blackout. Less than 10 seconds now, we will attempt to contact Apollo 13 through one of the Orion aircraft. Continuing to monitor this Apollo Control Houston. We've had a report that Orion 4 aircraft has acquisition of signal.
Odyssey Houston, we show you on the mains. It really looks great.
Extremely loud applause as Apollo 13 on main chutes comes through loud and clear on the television display here.
The 3 exhausted astronauts land in the Pacific Ocean and get picked up by the helicopter carrier USS Iwo Jima. They will be going home safe. The emergency measures taken to save the crew of Apollo 13 after the accident were a success. The moon landing on the Fra Mauro crater, however, remained out of reach. With the spectacle of the rescue now concluded, focus shifted entirely to one lingering question. Why did this happen? A review board is assembled in order to investigate the origin of the explosion. Looking back at the telemetry, Oxygen Tank 2 was showing some very strange readings right before the explosion. 1.5 minutes before the accident, the pressure within Oxygen Tank 2 unexpectedly rose extremely high. The pressure maxed out at 1008 psi, at which point a relief valve opened which lowered the pressure to 996 psi before the telemetry suddenly dropped out from the explosion. This unexpected pressure rise could not be accounted for by any of the energy entering the tank from its heaters, fans, or sensors. The crew was not made aware of this sudden pressure rise because of previous issues around the hydrogen tank. The hydrogen tank's low pressure warning light happened to be activated before the oxygen tank's high pressure warning light. Both were part of the same cryogenic warning light subsystem. Since the system could not display both of these errors simultaneously, the hydrogen tank's mundane low pressure reading had overwritten the immediately life-threatening oxygen tank high pressure warning. The temperature probe inside of that tank also showed a rapid and unexpected rise in its temperature a mere 20 seconds before the explosion. In addition to the temperature and pressure rising before the explosion, the energy usage indicated electrical arcing was happening somewhere inside of that tank. About 2.7 seconds after the cryofans were turned on, an unexpected 11.1 amp spike and a matching voltage drop were recorded on the telemetry for that tank's electrical system. Materials used inside of the oxygen tank, like the Teflon insulation for the wiring, are not flammable under normal conditions. In an environment of pure supercritical oxygen, however, Teflon would be able to propagate a flame. The board looks into the specific oxygen tank's history, which reveals some alarming details. This tank was intended to be flown on Apollo 10 and had completed its acceptance testing beforehand. It showed no issues then. Due to previous Apollo flights showing some issues with electromagnetic interference around the vacuum pumps on the cryogenic tanks, the decision was made to remove and modify the shelf containing the oxygen tanks. In order to remove the shelf for modification, the 11 screws that hold the shelf onto the service module had to be taken out. One was forgotten. The ground crew, having believed all screws were removed and that the shelf was separated from the service module, attempted to remove it. The remaining screw pivoted the entire assembly upwards, hitting the shelf above it before dropping 2 inches back down into place. At this point, the ground crew had noticed their mistake, reported this incident, and properly removed the shelf. Testing would have to be done in order to verify that this tank drop didn't damage them. With the soon upcoming launch of Apollo 10 and the time it would take to test, it was decided that a new tank would be brought in and used instead of the dropped one. This decision spared Apollo 10 from this oxygen tank. The tank would later be tested and would verify that all of its components worked. It passed these tests and was installed inside of the service module slated for Apollo 13. The service module was moved to Kennedy Space Center where the rest of the Saturn V was being put together. The Saturn V was assembled and then moved onto the launch pad in order to complete the countdown demonstration test. This was a rehearsal of activating and pressurizing all of the rocket systems up until launch. This would verify that everything worked correctly when it came time to actually launch. The oxygen tanks inside of the service module were part of this test. They would be pressurized, tested, and then depressurized. Both tanks pressurized and worked normally. During depressurization, however, oxygen tank 2 would not drain all of the way. It was stuck at 65% and could not be made to drain more than that. Normal depressurization procedures involved blowing gaseous oxygen through the vent line, which would push on the oxygen and force it up through a tube in the center of the tank, which would then drain through the fill line. It was known that manufacturing tolerances around one section of this fill tube, called a dog's leg, were not particularly tight. With manufacturing tolerances stacked up, a particularly loose fill tube could be jolted open from something like the tank drop. This is believed to be the main cause of failure to drain completely. The gaseous oxygen, intended to push the denser oxygen up through the fill tube, was simply leaking back through the jolted open fill tube, leaving the rest of the oxygen in the tank. The technicians on the ground were aware of this issue and were not concerned by it. The failure to drain completely was not considered a problem for flight, as the spacecraft systems would be supplied by a separate tube which works fine. It was decided that they would power the heaters inside of that tank in order to boil off the oxygen and drain it that way. The technicians used the 65-volt ground power supply to power the heater inside of oxygen tank 2. Unbeknownst to the ground crew, a crucial piece of information was not passed up the line to the company responsible for manufacturing the tank. Originally, the ground power systems used 28-volt power, and so the tank's temperature limit switch was only rated for 28 volts. The ground power supply system was later upgraded to 65 volts. The heaters rely on a thermal limit switch in order to separate the circuit if it gets too hot. With the upgraded ground power, testing showed that the 65 volts flowing through the thermal limit switch rated for less than half that welded the switch shut, rendering it useless. The heaters on that tank, from that moment onwards, had absolutely no thermal limits it could reach before shutting off. Ground control was watching the temperature sensor inside of that tank to make sure it didn't reach temperatures too high, but since that sensor was not designed to display temperatures higher than 84 degrees Fahrenheit, they would not be aware that the heaters were being operated well beyond their safe temperatures. To ground control, the tank was only 84 degrees, and anything beyond that would be stopped by the temperature limit switch opening. Both assumptions were wrong. The heaters, now unbound by the disabled temperature limit switch, would reach an estimated 1000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to make steel visibly glow red. The tank would sit like this, cooking its own internals for the next 8 hours. The extreme heat inside of the tank damaged the Teflon insulation for the cryofan wires, exposing bare metal. Now this meant that anytime the cryofans were activated, it risked creating a short within the oxygen tank. Ground control, unaware of the dangerous situation the tank is now in, and wanting to make sure that tank wouldn't act up during launch procedures, decided to test the tank again. The tank didn't show any other issues during testing, and so it was decided that it would be good to launch. The tank would also fail to drain completely on this occasion, prompting the ground crew to repeat the heating. The same mistake had been made twice. This tank would undergo another round of extreme overheating, which continued to burn off the insulation around the wires for the cryofans. With the now severely damaged Teflon insulation around the cryofan wires, and a ground crew oblivious to the severe damage inside of that tank, it was certified as good to go and then launched into space. This set the stage for the explosion. When the astronauts were up in space, the cryofans were activated and an electrical arc was formed across the wires. The Teflon insulation, severely degraded and sitting in a pure supercritical oxygen environment, ignited from the electrical spark. Like the fuse to a bomb, this Teflon insulation burned for 1.5 minutes. The fire created extra pressure inside of the supercritical tank, which began venting. It reached the temperature sensor and then the point where the wires entered the supercritical oxygen tank. This also happened to be the weakest point in the tank where the wires passed through into the pressurized environment. This is the part of the tank that gave out and triggered the explosion. It was incredibly lucky for the crew that the tank exploded when it did. If it were sooner, it would have left the crew stranded with the same resources but a far longer journey ahead of them. If it had happened later and the crew had entered lunar orbit like they were planned to, it would have also been fatal. The service propulsion system was not made to send the entire Apollo stack back to Earth. If they had separated, Jack Swigert would have been the only one aboard the command service module in lunar orbit. With the moon blocking radio communications for 1/2 of that orbit, he would have possibly had to deal with all of the consequences of the tank's explosion completely and entirely alone. Even if the crew on the lunar surface managed to hear about this and abort their moon mission, there still would have been no way to save the astronauts. The descent stage, containing the oxygen they now needed to get home, would have been left on the surface of the moon. The wires had not ignited the first 2 times the cryofans were stirred. It was on the 3rd stir that the wires floated close enough together to arc. The rate that they were stirring these fans was changed from their original plans. Because of that tank's quantity gauge failing off-scale high, ground control wanted these cryotanks to be stirred at a much higher rate.
Because of the O2 tank 2 quantity sensor dropout, ECOM wants to keep a little closer track of the cryo quantities, and he's going to be asking you to stir all the cryo tanks at slightly more frequent intervals than have been planned. And the first time is now.
This decision placed the 3rd stir of the oxygen tank within the only survivable section of this mission where this incident could happen. If this gauge worked as intended, the cryos would have been stirred at their normal rates, placing the 3rd stir of that cryofan in lunar orbit with no way to return home. During the explosion, the telemetry indicated that the reactant valves for just the oxygen on fuel cells 1 and 3 were jolted closed. The crew was not made aware of this issue because the system on the service module only reported of both the hydrogen and oxygen reactant valves closed. The hydrogen reactant valve remained open, and so the system showed that they should still work. If the crew had been made aware of this issue, they could have opened those reactant valves and sent oxygen from the still working tank into those fuel cells to keep them running. Because of this oversight, the service module was stuck with a far lower power output immediately following the explosion. It also left mission control in a position where they needed to reroute their limited power onto the dead AC bus 2 in order to start up sensors just so they could figure out what was going on. These findings, along with many others, were used to issue changes to procedure and upgrades to the Saturn V rocket planned for future moon landings. The oxygen tank would be completely redesigned, removing the Teflon insulation and replacing it with magnesium oxide, as well as sheathing all of the wires together in stainless steel. Now that NASA had more knowledge about how supercritical oxygen moves in a zero-gravity environment, it was decided that the cryofans could be removed altogether. The quantity gauge was redesigned, an emergency battery and oxygen tank were added to the service module, the warning alarm system was redesigned, and procedures for the lunar module's lifeboat mode were dramatically improved along with many other upgrades. With the cause of the explosion tracked down, the board closes their investigation with this statement made to the House of Representatives. The Apollo 13 accident, which aborted man's 3rd mission to explore the surface of the moon, is a harsh reminder of the immense difficulty of this undertaking. The total Apollo system of ground complexes, launch vehicle, and spacecraft constitutes the most ambitious and demanding engineering development ever undertaken by man. For these missions to succeed, both men and equipment must perform to near perfection. That this system has already resulted in 2 successful lunar surface explorations is a tribute to those men and women who conceived, designed, built, and flew it. Perfection is not only difficult to achieve, but difficult to maintain. The imperfection in Apollo 13 constituted a near disaster, averted only by outstanding performance on the part of the crew and the ground control team which supported them. The board feels that the Apollo 13 accident holds important lessons which, when applied to future missions, will contribute to the safety and effectiveness of manned spaceflight. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my prepared statement. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe if you want to see more. I also have a Blue Sky account and a Discord server if you want to follow those and see behind the scenes of these videos. If you want some of the Blender files I used in my videos, like the Saturn V rocket I modeled for this one, I'll have them up on my Patreon page soon after this video is uploaded. Any donations made through there or the YouTube donation comment feature will get a shout out at the end of my next video as a thanks. Feel free to email or message me on Discord for commission work. I also make music videos and such. If you like this video, you'll also like the one I made on the Hubble Space Telescope on screen now.